Code 8 Part 2 is directed by Jeff Chan and stars Robbie Amell and Stephen Amell reprising their roles in this sequel to Code 8. So this movie didn't release in theaters, it went straight to Netflix, but I was a big fan of the first Code 8 movie. It wasn't perfect, obviously, but I really enjoyed it, and I'm a fan of Stephen Amell and Robbie Amell, so I really wanted to take the time to talk about this movie now that it just released on Netflix. And I have to say, while I really liked the first one, this one I don't think quite lives up to its potential. It's honestly pretty disappointing to me. I was really excited to see this movie and see where they might take the franchise and continue the story, especially because the first one was such a tight-knit story. It was basically people with superpowers doing heists to further their own characters, you know, Robbie Amell and saving his mother, and Stephen Amell and becoming the drug lord that he wants to become. And that was honestly a really fascinating story with a lot of great character growth. This movie is kind of the opposite of that. Not a lot happens here. It's honestly kind of messy when you really break it down. We're still following the same characters, but with some added new ones that honestly made the narrative kind of confusing. Not in a hard to understand way, but more in a direction sort of way. The film starts off strong, showing you flashbacks from the first movie and kind of retelling the story and setting up the world for people that maybe didn't see the first one. And we get to open on Robbie Amell's character Connor and his reunion, you could say, with Stephen Amell's character Garrett. There's a history there, there's something fascinating there, and I want to kind of explore that. But then the movie does a time jump. And I'm immediately a little bit nervous when that happens. Because now it takes, hey, remember where we left off at the end of the first one? Well, we're gonna fast forward a bit and not really explain to you how we got here. They introduced these new robotic police dogs, which are supposed to be a non-lethal alternative to the Guardians from the first film, and it quickly becomes obvious where this story is going to go. But even with that clear layout, the movie does become messy. But as always, let's talk about some positives first. Stephen Amell and Robbie Amell do a great job once again. I really love watching them act. I'm big fans of theirs, so obviously I'm gonna enjoy watching them on screen. I think the characters are still very fascinating, and I do want to see their journey continue. The world they set up is also very interesting to me. I love the idea of 4% of the population having superpowers and the rest of the world kind of making them outcasts. I just kind of think that setup is very interesting, and you can do a lot with it, which was very successful in the original short film and in the first feature-length film. It's also pretty clear that their budget went up for this one with the success of the first film. CGI is a lot cleaner in this one, the visual effects are a little bit stronger, and the production value overall is really great. There's some beautifully shot sequences of like slow motion and action scenes that I really did enjoy watching, and just the visual look of the world, it felt more fleshed out this time around than it did in the first one. With all of that great world building though, we do miss out on a lot of character development. One of my biggest issues with this film is that nothing really changes for these characters from beginning to end. You know, in the first film, we do have them growing from where they start in the film to where they end, especially with Connor in the first film really struggling at the start, trying to make money in a mostly legitimate way, to him getting into the drug cartel business and kind of going down that darker path and looking for that redemption and what's it all for. That's a really compelling story. Yes, it's been done before, but it is done very well in that first film. This time around, though, nothing like that really happens. He doesn't change or grow at all from where he starts in this film to where he ends in the film. It actually makes a point of showing that he's basically in the same spot that he was before. The same can be said for Garrett. In this one, he's much more of a cartel leader and is making bribes with the police force. And while I would say his character grows a little bit more and we do start to see some of that heart that you would hope that he has, you know, like he's not a good guy, but he's not really like a bad guy. He's in it for himself and is willing to put his well-being above others. However, you do see a bit of growth in there that kind of tugs at the heart of the story where we're not really sure which way he's gonna go. But that's really all the character development we get in this film. The film is really focused on introducing all these new characters. A girl that has a very unique ability, her caretaker and a tragedy around him, this new police officer who is seemingly corrupt and we unravel a mystery there as well, this woman who's been looking after Connor ever since the end of the first film. I'm all for growing your world and introducing more characters, but it feels like they're so focused on solely expanding this world and setting up for a sequel that we kind of lose out on the original main characters that we had from the first film. That brings me to my next point. The movie doesn't really accomplish anything. It feels like the whole movie is building up toward a sequel that hasn't happened yet, and it really feels like they're just trying to franchise instead of focusing on making a very strong, centered story this time around. A big part of this story centers around corruption of this dystopian police force, and while I found that really interesting and I wanted to spend time on that, the movie doesn't really let me. Yes, that was interesting, but I really wanted to explore that more, and we didn't really get to do that. I feel like that aspect specifically could have been much more fleshed out, and we could have spent more time learning of the depths of the corruption, but instead, it's kind of played off as the corruption is centered around one person, and once that's fixed, it's all over. The pacing in this film also isn't really as strong as the first one. I believe the runtimes are really close together. I think it's about an hour and 40 minutes, maybe a little bit more than that, but this one certainly feels a lot longer and a lot slower than the first one did. The film's inciting incident happens very quickly. It's shot well, there's some good action sequences around it, and I was ready to explore it in a larger plot sense, but it's definitely toned down in my opinion. I was really expecting it to lead to this huge plot, and it really didn't. That's also something I should point out. My expectations for this film are probably a little bit higher than somebody who hasn't heard of Code 8 before. I've been a fan of this world and this story since the first short film got announced. Maybe it's just because I'm expecting a little bit more out of it, and I want the story to explore these characters more, and they're really not going for that. But I don't know, I really feel like it could have been better, and I feel like it would have been if they just focused on story and less on setting up a universe. But again, it's not all bad. There's still plenty to like here. Again, the characters are still the same. Even though there's no real arcs, it is still fun to see them back. The action is great, the effects are great. There's definitely less action in this one than there was in the first, but it's still a really fascinating world to be in, and it's a lot of fun to see those action set pieces play out. It's not bad, but it's messy and a little unfocused. I'm giving Code 8 a 6 out of 10. It really wasn't bad, and I enjoyed aspects of it, but because of how messy it felt with trying to build the world, I wasn't a big fan of the writing in this one. I just really wanted to explore those characters and continue the story that we had in the first, and this movie didn't really do that. That being said, I'd still love to see a Code 8 Part 3, and I'd love to explore where we can take this franchise in the future, if it becomes a franchise. I just hope that we don't sacrifice great characters and good storytelling for a larger universe. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of Code 8 Part 2, or what's your favorite franchise that maybe not a lot of us have heard of. Subscribe for more reviews very soon, and until then, so long, friends.